that risk-free all of a sudden? I guess I was lost. You just kind of arbitrarily said it was.
There does not seem to be any risk in the transaction down here at all because these are all current prices, right? These are all current prices. These are known prices.
But we just did a situation where it could have gone to a bad market and we would have lost $5. Why is that no longer?
Because you see, in every state of the world, we are always able to hit that $100 mark, correct? See, the risk-free asset paid $100 in state 1 and state 2. What is the definition of a risk-free asset? The definition of a risk-free asset is that you need to have a constant value irrespective of what happens, irrespective of whether you have state 1 of the world or state 2 of the world. That's why that transaction
State
is
2 was
risk-free.
$70, I thought. The bad one, we lost money.
Sorry, come again?
I thought you said state 2. State 2, I thought we lost $5 on the stock.
I'm not sure that we lost money on the stock. Yeah, which one are we talking about?
Stock C in the bad state.
This one?
No, the one that's going to the top. Yeah.
Here?
No, go at the top.
Under the top. That one there? Okay.
I'll cut my loss.
Oh, this one?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Which one are we talking about now?
The bad state. The bad state for stock
Yeah.
C.
The bad state of $70 down here. Yeah. You know, how does that translate to this?
I'm not sure I understand what I'm asking, but it's like you waved a wand and suddenly everything was risk-free. I don't see how that equation happened when we just dealt with the same stocks. And
See, the idea down here is it doesn't matter what these prices are. What is the what do you mean by risk down here? You have a certain destination and you want to reach the destination, right? The destination itself is irrelevant. The certainty of reaching the destination is what we mean by risk-free. That's all. Am I able to replicate 120 in state 1 of the world? Yes. Am I able to hit 70 in state 2 of the world? Yes. If that is my objective, if my object is to recreate stock C, and there could be any number of reasons why you want to recreate stock C. Have I done that with certainty? The answer to that question is yes. Irrespective of what happens to stock C in state 1 or state 2 of the world, I've always been able to replicate the payoff of stock C. Yeah.
More precise than the arbitrage question, you said suppose price of stock C in this state is not $65, then that would be the price of this state.
The prices, I think you guys are paying too much attention to the prices here. The prices here are essentially relevant. I can use any sequence of prices I want down here. Okay? The prices itself here should not be vested with deeper meaning. It's just a price. I can use any other sequence of prices that I want down here. The only thing that I should not violate is that one stock should completely dominate another stock. That's the only violation. Any other questions, guys? Sure. What's the difference? Yeah, that was actually a little bit unclear. I tend to think of a payoff as being quantity multiplied by price. A price is just a price without a quantity. In fact, yesterday I think I was talking to someone down there. It took me a long time to figure out what was going on because of that. Okay? That's why I was like, this is about saying that that's a payoff, not a price. Yeah. Elvira?
Yeah, after we know this about arbitrage and efficiency, what's the validity of the capital asset pricing model? It looks like everybody's looking for arbitrage opportunity, but the wasted max allocation.
But you see, that's the fundamental idea behind the capital. The fact that profits are being exploited in the market and they're being exploited very efficiently is what leads to all this stuff down here. To find profits in the market is an extremely difficult thing to do. You might remember day trading about 3 or 4 years ago. The SEC did a study and found that 1 out of 1,000 people who did day trading actually ended up making profits. 1 out of 1,000. And yet, you always bump into a guy who says, oh, I did day trading, I made $1 million.
But there is a big difference, in the capital asset pricing model, everybody has the access of the same information.
Right.
Whereas if efficiency and just one is
The arbitrage underpins all these models essentially. If there was risk-free profits available in the market, none of the financial models that we're talking about, CAPAM, security market line, APT, are going to be valid. All right, guys, I think we are done. I'll see you guys in class.
Oh, yeah.
I want to use risky assets to replicate the return on the risk-free asset. We'll come back and take a look at that idea a little later. where we talk about arbitrage-free pricing. Okay. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use stock A and stock B to clone a risk-free bond. Now, the new bond that I'm going to create is sometimes called, or the new asset that I'm going to create is sometimes called a synthetic security. A synthetic is like polyester, something that's created out of other fibers down here. So basically what you want to do is you want to use stock A and stock B to replicate a risk-free bond. Okay? Let's set up the synthetic portfolio down here. And the risk-free bond down here. And here we have the states. Okay, the two states that we have are state 1 and state 2, or good and bad, which are generic states. So the state itself, you shouldn't attach too much meaning to it. You can just call it state 1 and state 2 if you will. The return on the risk-free bond in state 1 of the world is? What's the value of the risk-free bond 1 year from today? 100, that's right, it's 100. What is the value of the risk-free bond if the bad state of the world occurs 1 year from now? 100, yeah, that's why it's called a risk-free bond, right? Its future value is constant, it's basically guaranteed by the government. Now what you want to do is this, you want to create a portfolio on the left-hand side that will mimic the behavior of the portfolio on the right-hand side. So you want to create something here that will be equal to the risk-free bond in state 1 of the world. You want to create something on the left-hand side that will be equal to the risk-free bond in state 2 of the world, all right? Now, what is the price of stock A if state 1 of the world occurs? $30, right? It should be 30, correct? Okay, so let's have 30 down here. And what I'm going to do is, you also have numbers of shares, right? So this is the price of stock A. I'm going to use QA to represent the quantity of stock A. You can think of that as basically being equal to shares of stock A, all right? Supposing state 1 of the world occurs, the good state occurs, what's the price of stock B? 18. And then, of course, we multiply this by the number of shares, which I'm going to call QB, quantity of stock B, all right? Now let's do the same thing for stage 2. In stage 2, the price of stock A is $10 multiplied by the number of shares or the quantity of shares of stock A plus $12 times quantity of B. You can immediately see that phrased in this fashion, it's quite obvious what it is that we are trying to do down here. The prices are given, the variable down here is the number of shares. So by picking the appropriate number of shares, you should be able to replicate the risk-free bond, but by using risky stocks like stock A and stock B down here. You can easily solve this. Simply multiply, for instance, the bottom number by 3. If you do that, you will find that QA is equal to how much? QA equals, go ahead and solve that, see what you come up with. value. QA should, if you solve this, QA should be equal to negative 3.33 and QB is equal to 11.11 shares. Here's the interpretation. In order to close the risk-free bond, we are creating a synthetic security made up of the following: 3.33 shares of stock A and 11.11 shares of stock B. Now what confused most of you was the negative sign down there, and the negative sign down there really represents a short position, and the positive sign for 11.11 represents long position. This is actually very conventional, and we are going to be using this convention pretty much for the rest of the course in option pricing theory. A negative sign is a short position. A plus sign is a long position. Okay. Now, short and long often confuses people, but there is a very simple interpretation of the negative sign and the positive sign. Simply think of the negative sign as being asking you to sell, and the positive sign as asking you to buy. Okay. So basically, the argument down here is telling you that in order to create this synthetic security, you need to sell 3.33 shares of stock A, and you need to buy 11.11 shares of stock B. Now, what will that actually do? Yeah.
You mean first borrow security A and then...
So let's not worry about the borrowing. I think that makes things more complicated. Let me do the actual transactions, and perhaps it will be clearer, rather than using terms like short and long down here. Okay, let's use it in a much more common sense kind of fashion. Buying and selling, something that everyone is familiar with. All right. So here's again what we have established so far. We have established that by selling 3.33 shares and buying 11.11 shares of stock B, you should be able to replicate the future value of the risk-free bond in state 1 and the future value of the risk-free bond in state 2. Now here is a fundamental theorem in finance. A very fundamental theorem in finance tells you that in an efficient arbitrage-free market, if the future value of portfolio 1 equals the future value of portfolio 2, then this will automatically imply that the present value of portfolio 1 will also be equal to the present value of portfolio 2. Sorry? This particular condition will hold if there are no arbitrage opportunities, meaning that there are no risk-free opportunities. Okay. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, it will go back, the causality runs both